So all the things I'm going to show you, they've been made with greenwood. So my wee sign there says working in greenwood. That just means that the wood that I'm working hasn't been seasoned yet. You actually work the wood while it's still fresh, it's still green and still soft. The trick with doing that is to work with the nature of the wood. As you can make wooden bowls, wooden plates, rolling pins. These are marvellous. We use these for mashing all sorts, anything from mashing grapes for making wine, lactic pickled ferments. They're a real handy tool. You know, that's a handle for a scythe. That's a chisel handle. Just stirring spatulas. And this was when I was getting musical one time. That's a percussion instrument. When you're working with greenwood, you've got to bear in mind that as it dries out, it's gonna move and it's gonna shrink. So you've got to be kind of aware of that as you're working it. And so the first thing is if you take a curved branch or a curved piece of a trunk and you make something straight out of it, so you actually just physically force it into a straight shape, then as it dries, it's gonna bend again. So what you want to start with is nice straight wood to begin with, and so that's why I've picked out fairly nice straight pieces of wood. First part of the process, because you're dealing with this relatively small diameter stuff, you don't want to be sawing it lengthways. It would be really wasteful with most kinds of saws, and if you were doing it by hand it would take you ages and it'd be really hard work. So the traditional way of doing it was to split or cleave the wood in half. This tool's called a froe, and what you do is drive it into the end grain, and I'm looking to leave a half volume of the wood either side of the split. And with this tool, to a degree, you can actually control the way that the cleft runs. I made this felling axe handle, and this was made out of a log that was split down into sections, so the grain runs true right from end to end of this. All the natural flexibility of the tree as it's been growing is now in this plane, so you've created a naturally laminated spring. So for an axe that's got to absorb all that shock, it means that it's perfectly orientated to absorb the shock. Most trees grow off centre, okay, so you can see that the pith of the wood is kind of way off to one side on this, so it's gonna, usually it's better to go through the pith, but to get an even volume I'm gonna have to go at a fairly strange angle there. So I'm going to put a piece of wood on the lathe here, and so what I'm going to take eventually is a cylinder out of this piece of wood. The nearer cylindrical I can get this with other hand tools, the better. Because it's got that flat edge, you can trim really accurately. If you're using an ordinary hatchet, that inner bevel would tend to carry you out of the wood all the time. But with this, I can pretty much plane down with it.
And do you grow this wood especially for this purpose?
These particular ones were already planted at our place, fortuitously, but we have planted hundreds of trees with at least partly with the idea of using them in this kind of way. I'm going to carry on the shaping process on the shave horse. So this is just a really simple foot operated vise. For this, because I'm working this to a cylinder, I need to keep turning it on. Can you imagine if I was doing that in a bench vise? You know, you'd be spending all your time fucking about with a handle trying to sort it out. Do all your finishing on that. You know, if I was, as I say, when I was making the axe handle, I finished the whole thing on that, mostly with the draw knife, and then maybe using a spoke shave, and then finally a scraper of some sort, just to finish off But anyway, yeah, we'll stick this on the lathe, see that. So, yeah, these are called pole lathes, and they get the name from the pole that gives the spring for the treadle. So the way that it works is, you know, as you treadle, the pole, the natural spring of the pole is taking the treadle back up again. So the piece of wood that you're working is actually spinning backwards and forwards, and you can only cut on the downstroke. So the downstroke of the treadle, you want it spinning towards you. As you're treadling down, that's your cutting stroke. Yeah, the one thing that you really need to watch out with these lathes though, mainly when you're demonstrating, is that if you let that run loose, this is like a bow and arrow, and it can kick a piece of wood right across the... This is where the crowd usually divides. It's like Moses. So yeah, once you've got it kind of roughed out, you can move to the flat chisel, and having a nice broad chisel just means you can keep the back edge of it out, because if that top corner digs in, it chews up the whole thing. So it needs to be fairly broad. But this basically gives a nice planing cut, and it basically leaves a plain surface behind it. So straight away you can start to see how smooth and nice the wood comes off. Yeah, that's a skew chisel. So I'm gonna part this off here. This is the tool that you'd use for doing the bulk of kind of decorative work. What I'm doing there is picking up a shaving with the heel of the skew, and then you sort of follow it round and in. But it is actually quite easy to sort of dig the chisel in the wrong angle, and it can spiral back through the piece. When I'm actually working towards the final shape of something, I'm rarely looking at the chisel itself. What I'm looking at is that back profile, and you can see where you're up to, and you can see the shape, and you can see irregularities in the shape that you need to sort of work on.
Does the wood split if you let it
there's
dry
a good
too
question.
fast?
Because of the way that we've prepared it, if you take a round branch and you turn it, then as it dries, what it's trying to do, it's trying to shrink in on itself, and so they crack and split and check and whatever. But if you've taken a section of the wood, so it's like a section into the middle, the wood actually shrinks more, I think I've got this the right way around, radially than it does tangentially. And so what you turn as a perfect cylinder will actually dry out slightly oval in cross section. So if you go to an old Windsor chair and you feel the legs, if they're perfectly round, somebody's cheating, okay? You know, you should be able to actually feel the ellipse of the wood, so that it preparing it like this by cleaving it down into a section allows the wood to distort and move rather than split. But just to show the kind of the process and whatever, and it's very
strong. Yeah,
very
not
nice.
getting too dicky down there.
You need to be careful. When you're doing that, that actually is weaker than that. It's where it's kind of a thinner neck and thick either side that you've got to watch. The big gouge there is the one I would use to rough out the wood. The flat chisel is the one that kind of gives a finished surface. So general sort of gentle curves and so on I would shape with that chisel. Tighter decoration and tight curves I would use the skew chisel, and grooves you'd use the little spindle gouge. And pretty much all the turning I do, I just use those 4 chisels.